We are live. We are live. Welcome to College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Flugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. We just did the Michigan Wolverines spring football game live watch party. That's how crazy we are. And if you are as crazy as us about the game that we love, college football, please subscribe to our channel. Smash that like button if you like our content. Share the video with the family and friends, your cat and your dog, your priest, your psychiatrist. Share the video. Welcome into the house that sits on the corner of Keith Jackson Parkway and Kirk Gowdy Avenue. Welcome in. It's been a very sad 24 hours. We've all learned the passing of Chris Petrie, our dear friend, Golden Blue Dude, father, fiance. He loved his Mountaineers. He loved his college football. He loved his family and his loved ones even more. And that came through in all of his videos. We salute Chris today. We'll never forget Chris. And the next time we see Chris, it will be forever. I thought about not having this live show. We did an episode early this morning, a tribute to Chris. But you know what? Golden Blue Dude, at 1 o'clock Central Time here in the afternoon, he would have already had 2 episodes done. 2 videos done, working on a third one. Nobody outworked the Golden Blue Dude. Nobody outworked him. And nobody brought people together like he did. Everybody watched his videos. Everybody loved the entertainment that he brought. Everybody loved his passion. So his video brought people together. His videos, no matter, look, we agreed with them, disagreed with them. That was the brilliance of it all. His entertainment value, his passion, his love. My favorite among favorites, but my favorite video of all time when it came to Chris Petrie's channel was when he was coming home from that loss, West Virginia loss to Pittsburgh, and he had the camera in the car and he was looking at it and he was just putting out his emotions, his passion. Mountaineers lost a tough game to the Panthers, backyard brawl, and he just put it out there like all of us do in the privacy of our own home. He put it out there for everybody to see. That's college football. Taking the L, taking the W. He opened up his heart, his passion every single time, and he always talked about the love of his life and his children. Always. So I love the guy. We talked. He came up on this YouTube channel many times in the chat room, and we talked behind the scenes. So rest in peace, Chris. Next time we see you, it will be forever. And we're going to do this live show because Chris would have. You know he would have. He would have outworked every single one of us like he always did. So we're going to do it. So welcome in. The monologue is just going to be one. We're going to go through the Dennis Dodd's CBS article from yesterday. In his interview with Jimmy Williams, a longtime media consultant, we're going to break through that article bit by bit. I'm going to give you my thoughts. I want you to give me your thoughts in the comments section and also phone calls when we open it up later. The Pac-12 is still fighting an uphill battle to save the conference. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of nugget, just a tiny bit of nugget from our Arizona State Money Perch source. It has to do with a deadline. What he perceives Arizona State's deadline when it comes to all of this. He's going to kind of flip it around a little. He's going to kind of flip the script a little bit. I think it's going to be interesting what I think you're going to find what he has to say very interesting. But first, I want to get to our very special sponsor. We are incredibly fortunate to have Blue Ridge Coffee Crafters as a sponsor to our show. We invite you to discover the Blue Ridge Coffee Crafters difference. Clean, hot air roasted coffee produces a smoother, richer, healthier coffee that is less bitter and less acidic. Our hot air roasted coffee uses convection heat to loft the beans for a very even heat transfer. The clean, bright taste that people rave about is achieved by roasting the bean quickly and evenly while suspended on a bed of hot air. From craft to cup, hand-picked coffee beans, the smoothest coffee, the little general, the wife, the moderator of this channel. She rules with an iron fist, but this coffee makes her bend her knees. She loves this coffee. So give it a try. There's a link in the description box. Hit that link, order your coffee, and if you want to support this channel, put PATC in the comments section and try the most beautiful coffee me and the little general have ever had. Oh, and one more thing. I almost forgot. As we go through today's episode, College Football's Peek Around the Corner presents Cloak and Dagger. Those are the official game rules. And the merchandise store. There's also a link in the description box. Get your hoodie, get your mug, get your trucker hat. We're also going to be coming out with some stuff in about the next 30 days. I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint. Always keep your head on a swivel. You remember how I say that over and over and over again? Always keep your head on a swivel. We're going to be coming out with some new artwork, some new stuff. It's going to be pretty funny, humorous stuff. So keep your head on a swivel, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Yeah. I see a lot of great comments for Chris. Also put in your comments about your favorite memory of Chris. And also when you call in, of course, you can talk about the Gold and Blue Dude as much as you want on this channel. I appreciate it. Okay, let's get to the main article of today. This was yesterday, by the way. Dennis Dodd, Pac-12, unlikely to reach media rights deal with more than 50% of games airing on TV. Long-time consultant says that was Mr. Jimmy Williams. Dennis Dodd, this was yesterday at 5:06 p.m. Eastern Time. As the Pac-12 continues its search for a new media rights deal, it becomes less viable. The conference will land a partner willing to feature more than half its games on traditional cable or broadcast television, media consultant Jim Williams told CBS Sports. The assertion could be a deal breaker as the Pac-12 presidents consider whether a deal heavy on streaming would be enough to keep their schools in the league. Arizona president Robert Robbins twice doubled down. He doubled down. Twice told CBS Sports in the last 3 weeks he expected over half of the Pac-12 content to be on traditional linear TV platforms with networks such as CBS, Fox, ESPN, and NBC, considered the gold standard in live sports programming. Robert Robbins told CBS twice. How many times has he told George Kliakoff? Back to the article. Jimmy Williams, however, decided to go on the record with comments being repeated throughout the sports media industry. The Pac-12 may be running out of time in getting most of its content seen on a major linear carrier. I'm at an absolute loss how NBC, CBS, ESPN, ABC, or Fox gets the Pac-12 to 50%, said Williams, a Washington, D.C. based 7-time Emmy Award-winning producer who helped develop 5 different regional sports networks throughout a career that began in 1977. I don't know how anybody could sit there and assure you that we're going to have that much on linear, he added. I don't see how they get there. Of course, we've been hearing that a lot from our sources here at Peek Around the Corner. Same story, month after month. The exposure issue, exposure. It's never, this one time, it was not about the money. It's about the exposure. It could bury the front porch of these great Pac-12 universities, their athletic departments. It could bury them with this horrific exposure if it sounds like it's going to end up the way we all think it's going to end up. Getting back to the article, getting on those linear carriers is a key point in the Pac-12 maximizing its worth. It's believed the conference would remain intact if it can get a number close to or above the 31.6 million Big 12 schools will earn annually beginning in 2025. Again, at Peek Around the Corner, we don't think any Pac-12 school is going to leave to the Big 12 if they get 25, 26, 27 million per school. But it's about the exposure. If it's horrific exposure in the Pac-12 media deal, yes, the Big 12 will be successful in poaching Pac-12 schools. The Big 12, meanwhile, remains interested in an expansion effort that includes the Pac-12 Four Corner schools, Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. What is close enough? Williams asked. I assume close enough is somewhere north of 25 million in that 27 million and 28 million category. Short of a major linear carrier, Williams sees value in both ION and CW networks. ION, owned by Scripps Corp, is a general entertainment network that is in 37 of the top 50 markets and was mentioned early in the process by Action Network Brett McMurphy as having conversations with the Pac-12. Brett McMurphy He brought you this information. Some people mocked him. They should not have mocked him. We definitely didn't at Peek Around the Corner, I can assure you that. The CW is a majority owned by Nexstar Media Group. The group of stations reportedly reaches 100% of U.S. television markets, providing 14 hours of prime time programming per week. Its most notable sports property currently is Live, however, golf. That's not very good. That's not very good. I'm not a big believer that CW or ION is going to give the Pac-12 presidents what they need. Some of those Pac-12 presidents. We'll get back to that. They could get there with ION or get there with CW, Williams said of the Pac-12. Personally, if I were talking to one of these presidents, I would have zero problem with CW. They've got legacy television stations all over the country. This is where I disagree with Jimmy Williams on this particular point. The list includes superstations WPIX in New York and KTLA in Los Angeles. I've said it 5 or 6 times, Williams added. If they want to prove me wrong, I'm happy. I've been proven wrong before. I'll be proved wrong in the future. Both of those two are legit broadcasters. There's no question both of those are broadcasters, legit broadcasters. I can see where Jimmy's coming from, Mr. Williams. I just don't think it's going to be good enough to get all Pac-12 presidents to sign on board, and I'll get to that after the article. Also at issue is exactly how many of the approximately 60 to 70 Pac-12 games available for bidding would be streaming. That number would increase if the 10-team league expands. Live college sports haven't hit yet on an investment on streaming platforms. However, it hasn't hit yet. The streaming part of it hasn't really come through. It hasn't hit yet. In general, athletic directors and coaches would be against a large streaming component, as lack of visibility likely results in negative impact on recruiting and branding, as we've talked about before, and eventually it buries the front porch of these great universities. That begs another question. Would having a large amount of content on ESPN Plus streaming platform be more acceptable to the Pac-12 than having games on Apple or Amazon? This is, of course, assuming ESPN is still involved in talks. To put the Pac-12 predicament in perspective, the Big 12 will have a minimum of 70% of its games on linear platforms in its new media rights deal. It had been widely speculated that ESPN will take a piece of the Pac-12 along with a streaming provider. However, the New York Post reported last month, Andrew Machon, that ESPN once had a deal on the table for the Pac-12 equal to that Big 12 number, $31.6 million, an offer that has been since revoked, according to the Post. I think where we are right now is Apple would take a piece and maybe play with Amazon to give them a Friday night game, a Pac-12 Friday night game. Williams said the trickier part is who then becomes the linear partner. He later added, how are you going to tell Apple yes? How do you tell Amazon yes if you've got athletic directors and presidents who are saying, no, we can't do this? And I think that's exactly where the situation is at this moment. Williams began consulting in 2000, mostly with the SEC, NFL, NBA, and colleges. Before that, he was the lead director of the Big Ten games regionally in the mid-1980s and worked more than 400 live sport events. His Emmys include one each of the Big Ten football and basketball, plus 2 for Major League Baseball. Last month, Robbins told CBS Sports in the same interview that the conference was 95% united, but also that his school could drive to Lubbock if it were in the Big 12. Robbins denied he was sending a message to Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff that Arizona had options with that comment. But Arizona, they do have options. Everybody knows it. They do have options. Big 12. It wasn't because I was emboldened, because we have options, Robbins said. There's no deal or no agreement where if everything blows up, we've got someplace to go. CBS Sports reported last week that no Pac-12 deal is imminent, less than 15 months before its current media rights deal expires. Sources indicate it could be months before such a deal is consummated. This gets to the point where we have a little bit of new intel that we want to share with you from the Arizona State money perch. A gentleman who I think history will show, if you go through all of our live shows, all of our episodes, a gentleman who has nailed this story from the beginning. He's got a little bit of extra nugget of information. I think you're going to be interested in what he says. It circles around this, well, exactly what type of timeline are we looking at? Back to the article. Moving forward, the issue becomes whether schools pursued by the Big 12 get antsy enough to take more of what might look like more of a sure thing in that conference, in the Big 12 conference. And finally, in the article, meanwhile, San Diego State, SMU, and UNLV have been mentioned in some combination as expansion candidates for the Pac-12, though any conference expansion would almost certainly have to come after a new media rights deal. The Big 12 is also believed to have interest in San Diego State, whose stock has risen quickly on the heels of the basketball program advancing all the way to the 2023 NCAA championship game. So we went through that whole article. Give me your thoughts and comments. I'm going to be going through them real quickly. And then we'll take your phone calls here in a little bit. The phone lines are not quite open. But when they do open, the number is 763-260-1333. I always get the number wrong. I do not know why, because I'm an idiot. 763-260-1333. That's the PATC phone number. Lines will be open here shortly. I'm going to give you my take on the whole thing. And then I'm going to give you my Arizona State intel. Latest bit of intel. I don't think, look, in a vacuum, with nothing else floating around the situation, would a CW, ION, these smaller linear networks, could that work? Yeah, it could work. I happen to think it's better to have a CW and ION, maybe a couple games on USA Network, whatever. Put a bunch of Band-Aids together, right? All these linear networks. I think all that would be better versus having Apple TV have the whole thing, right? And I don't think that's plausible. We said about 3 weeks ago now, here at Peek Around the Corner, we had some steam that Apple TV was out, that were actually out of these negotiations. Maybe we were wrong, but yet, still today, on April 5th, we still really haven't gotten confirmation yet that Apple TV is still in negotiations. No one has that bit of information. We don't. We have the opposite. The only steam we got is they were actually out. And if we end up being wrong, we'll be the first ones to say that we were wrong. But either way, cobbling up in 2023 to 2028, the better deal, in my opinion, is to cobble up these smaller linear networks, get a deal done versus taking it all to Apple TV. That's just my opinion. Here's the deal. Arizona State money perch. People are still asking me, what does the money perch mean? Okay, let's just be more direct. People with money who invest in these universities, athletic departments, and other parts of the university. They sit on a certain perch. They have an angle. The angle is money. They give us a view. It's limited. It's not infallible. They're not perfect. We are very limited, although our information that comes to us is getting more and more broader because we're getting more and more sources as we've turned up the dial on this YouTube channel. However, Arizona State Money Perch, I think hopefully now you understand exactly what position this person's in. Here's the intel. If this thing, okay, in that article, remember it said it might take months. Jimmy Williams said, Dennis Dodd article, it might take months for this deal to consummate, for this deal to get done. We're going to flip the script a little bit. Arizona State Money Perch flipped the script a little bit. He says by the middle of May, which is what, 6 weeks from now, if a deal isn't done, then there won't be any poaching. Let me step back. If there isn't any poaching, if no Pac-12 school leaves to the Big 12 before the middle of May, they're not leaving. So he's actually flipping the script. I'm going to repeat that. If no, according to Arizona State Money Perch, who has the eyes and the ears of Arizona State, if no Pac-12 school moves to the Big 12 by the middle of May, they're not moving to the Big 12. And this is the reason why. I know that sounds strange, but this is the reason why. Because these deals are not getting any better. They know it. They still don't have a comprehensive deal in front of them. It's a terrible situation. And if an ION, if a CW, or replace those networks with other networks, if this is good enough, if this low, very, very, very low bar is good enough for the Pac-12 universities, for none of them to say, Brett Yormark, we're in before the middle of May, then they're not leaving. Regardless of how bad maybe the decision is, they're not leaving. Now, the Arizona State Money Perch believes, look, he doesn't hold any hope for the Pac-12 at this point. They don't have a deal in front of them. Even if they get a deal done in 6 weeks, in 2 months, they're not going to survive the next 5 years. If you're going on these networks, the decline of the conference only continues. It does. It only continues. So, his belief, his thought of talking to people, Arizona State, and of course he talks to other big money perch people across the Pac-12 country. That's why he's been nailing the story from the very beginning. Look, a Pac-12 school might leave to the Big 12. It very well could happen. In fact, we at Peek Around the Corner has had that as the slight favorite since February 24th. I know John Wilner still has the Pac-12 staying together with the 10 current schools as what, a 2.5 point favorite? Something like that, 2.5 point favorite. We got the Pac-12 getting poached. We got the Big 12 poaching the Pac-12 as about a 3.5 point favorite at this point in time. But if it doesn't happen by the middle of May, that means, according to the Arizona State Money Perch, everybody has thrown their hands up in the air in the Pac-12 and said, yeah, we're not leaving no matter how bad a deal this is. Which, in his opinion, is a horrific, horrific decision. But that's where he's coming from. It is so bad right now. It is so bad right now in those meeting negotiations that if no one is willing to leave by the middle of May, then they've made the decision they're not leaving no matter what. So take that however you want to take it. I'm going to get to your comments, to your phone calls. Let's rock and roll. The monologue is finally over. And of course, you have the situation with Oregon and Washington. Middle of May, Big Ten commissioner, new one, possibly, probably. A lot of things going on. Skull Ducky, nice to see you in the house. James Foster, thanks for going live. You better believe it. K-Do, good afternoon. Luis Carlos Diaz, Mr. Aztec, Cloak and Dagger for lunch. Let's go. Sko Ducky. It was a pleasure of mine. Thank you so much. John Dry, yes, it was a pleasure. Howdy, Randy. Appreciate it. Lots of comments, lots of comments. Woo! I'm trying to catch up here. Trying to catch up. West Virginia guy, 56. RIP, golden blue dude, once a mountaineer, always a mountaineer. D5, Terps, Gold Terps. Thanks for coming in, D5. Appreciate it. Tony, Minnesota president. Joan Gable's leaving for Pittsburgh. Her tenure had its ups and downs, but she was very good for most sports. The next hire is huge for the university. Absolutely true. How do I say this? Maybe I shouldn't say it. I'm going to say it. I'm not liked by anybody anyway, so I was not a big fan of President Joan Gable. So I'm looking forward to the next president, university president. I'm not going to go into it at this point in time. Sean Eaton, Pac-12 problem. They haven't had a decent commissioner in 20 years. Holy cow. Buckshot Kid, Minnesota versus Boston University tomorrow in the Frozen Four. Seriously, a beautiful tribute. I listen to every word. Thank you, Anonymous. Appreciate your kind words. Son of Sarek, I guess BTM is a go for money perch man. I would think that you're probably correct. Yes. And his associates are all over the country. Adam Vulture. Greg, the deals are gone for the Pac-12. No one is going to give up money without USC and UCLA. I think another part of that, Adam, is people are hesitant to give money when everybody believes that Oregon and Washington will be out of the Pac-12 in the weeks, months, or few years ahead from now. That's another issue. The issue that Arizona State, Arizona, like Colorado are looking at is not just what happens here today, next week, next month, if they sign that deal. The question is what happens in the next 3 or 4 years? Because this media deal whatever media deal the Pac-12 is able to get, it's going to be so much different than the other power conferences. Will it work? Can it work? Will it grow on people? Will I be switching to CW? Let's just say CW is one of the linear networks. Will I flip on CW? From my perspective, I'll be more willing to flip on CW than go to my Apple TV. So it's better. I keep saying this because we had some speculation, some report out there that the Pac-12 was potentially working with NBC Universal. NBC Universal have some of the games on USA Network, have some streaming game, one game a week on Peacock. All that is better, again, from my perspective, all that is better than having all your content on Apple TV. Or splitting it between Apple TV and Amazon. Having a heavy streaming, that's not going to work. Robin said that's not going to work. He's not going to be for it. The president of Arizona. I'm heavily set against that being the deal. So all these little possibilities, cobbling together these linear networks to get a Pac-12 deal, I think that's all better than the worst case scenario. Here's the issue I have. I don't think you get all the Pac-12 presidents to sign on that deal. I don't think it happens. I don't think so. Because I think what the Big 12 can offer to a Colorado, to an Arizona, is so much better. That's just, and again, we've been saying this for months, that all the sources, they're all saying the same thing. They're all singing from the same songbook. There's so much unease behind the scenes of the Pac-12. The only thing that's keeping the Pac-12 together right now is because they want to stay together. Because they're peers to each other. They have commonality to each other. They've been playing each other for decades. They want to stay together. But for these schools to stay together and to get buried in the front porch of the university when it comes to exposure, some of those presidents I don't think are going to sign any type of deal. And I think they'll eventually go to the Big 12. That's our perspective. We've been saying it since February 24th. Since February 24th. Yeah. George promised $40 million per school. George Kliavkoff said a few things that, you know, it's not going to end up being anywhere close to what he said. Utah is allegedly not going anywhere until the Pac-12 folds, but that's according to the Monty guys who changed their opinions. I don't know. I don't watch. I've watched them a few times. I don't watch them enough to know. Maybe it could be quite true. Utah doesn't leave. Utah might not be one of those first schools out. If schools leave, the first schools that leave, if any of them do, probably won't be Utah. Utah won't be one of them. I can believe that. Utah might be thinking, well, if some schools leave to the Big 12, there'll be such an implosion. Maybe we can create a division for the ACC and ESPN. That could be. I know the Monty guys. I know one of the things they said about a month ago that the media deal was done, and now they're just working on the grant of rights. And we at Peek Around the Corner said, no, that report's not correct, or the source that gave them the information is not correct. There wasn't a deal because they haven't even seen a deal yet. There's no deal done because no presidents have actually seen a deal. So the Monty guys were way off on that, but I haven't followed them enough to know if they've hit on other parts of the story, and they probably have. None of these sources are going to know everything that's going on. A lot of our sources don't know anything that's going on, to be honest with you. Sean Eaton. Nobody talking about how silent Oregon and Washington have been during this whole realignment process. No public comments like other universities. Interesting. Very interesting, Sean. And you know what? I admit that. I've had people in the chat room like you, Sean, say that same exact thing. And I have failed to really make that a big point. So I apologize on that. Because I made that a big point during the USC Big Ten talks from March 31st on. Now, the talks happened before March 31st, but when we broke it, that USC called the Big Ten that this was going on. From March 31st to June 30th, we said a few times on Twitter at Flug Empire, the silence is deafening coming out of Los Angeles, USC. The USC president, athletic director, they weren't making any comments about the reformed Pac-12, how Pac-12 was going to do this and that and that and this. Other athletic directors, other presidents were talking about how the Pac-12 is going to do some certain things. And USC leadership, complete silence. Just like Texas, just like Oklahoma was 8 months prior to them announcing that they were leaving for the Big 12. Their athletic directors, their presidents at Texas and Oklahoma never said anything about what was happening inside the Big 12, what Bob Bowlesby was trying to do. Other athletic directors were cheerleading the cause. They were silent. And we pointed that out at Flag Umpire over and over and over again. So yes, getting back to the situation that we are now in. Oregon and Washington's silence is deafening. Sean Eaton is absolutely correct. And other people on our chat are absolutely correct. And we've said here at Peek Around the Corner, and I'm going to say it right here, right now. If the Big Ten expansion door is cracked open, and I know Jimmy Williams has a couple of sources telling him in the Big Ten that no, it's closed. We believe it's open. Now, there's a lot of hurdles between we believe the door is open to actually Big Ten expansion. But the door is open because there's enough people in the Big Ten that believe that they're going to have to expand out west eventually. And if they can get it at a discount rate, if they can get it on the cheap, if other people can grease the skids, i.e. a new media company partner with the Big Ten. And we do know this at Peek Around the Corner. You can take it however you want to take it. Fox Sports would be fine with the additions of Washington and Oregon. As long as someone else pays the freight on the Tier 1, Tier 2, Fox Sports would not be the hurdle to overcome for further Big Ten expansion. And that is why the Big Ten expansion door is cracked open at this time. We don't know at Peek Around the Corner why Pete Thamel said a couple weeks before we did that the Big Ten expansion door was cracked open. We don't know the information he has. We don't know why Matt Hayes said the Big Ten expansion door is cracked open. We know why we say the Big Ten expansion right now is cracked open a bit. And it has to do with Fox Sports saying, yeah, we'd be okay with that. If you guys can figure it out in the Big Ten Council, if you guys can, if you guys get the votes, if you get Gene Smith on board and all that stuff, we'd be okay with it. That's why we're saying it. Now, you might ask, well, how do you know, Greg, that Fox Sports is on board, would be okay with further Big Ten expansion as long as someone else pays the freight? Can't tell you why. You just have to either believe me, don't believe me, however you want to take it. But I'm just letting you know why we at Peek Around the Corner says at this time, the door is cracked open. We're not making any big announcements. Saying, Washington, Oregon, the Big Ten. This is not a March 31st, 2022 situation going on right now. Today at April 5th, 2023. But the door, from our estimation, is cracked open. Before we get to your phone calls, please remember, subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so. If you subscribe to our channel, you'll get notified of our upcoming live show or our episodes. Please smash that like button because it helps with the algorithm so much at YouTube. Share the video with the family and friends if you want to donate to this independent college football channel, the rebel outpost of all college football channels. If you want to donate, just hit that $sign, put up a comment, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. Let's open up the phone lines again. This is how we do it. 763-260-1333. You can talk about anything you want in college football. Anything. Anything you want, the floor is yours. 763-260-1333. Mr. Monkey says, when will the Big Ten hire its new commissioner? I think it's going to be in May, Mr. Monkey. I think it's going to be in May. Kevin Warren leaves April 17th. Will the Big Ten have the new commissioner right after he leaves? 12 days from now? Probably not. Probably not. Sean Eaton says the Big Ten isn't waiting to 2036 to expand. I heavily agree with Sean. Big Ten is going to expand in the East. And if they expand in the East, they know they're not going to be a 24-school conference or a 20-school conference with only 2 schools out in the Pacific Coast. That is what Peek Around the Corner has been told. Other people have been told that as well. It's not just us. We're not home on an island out there. Tony says the Big Ten should wait for FSU. Tony also asked a question about Arizona State potentially moving into the Big Ten Hockey Conference. We have no steam on that, but obviously there's some article out there. There is some steam that the Arizona State is finally getting close with their hockey programs to finally join a hockey conference. It's something you really need to do in hockey. It's so advantageous to your program not to be an independent program in hockey. That just doesn't work. I won't go into it why now, but you have automatic bids in hockey. There's a couple schools in the tournament this year that only made it to the NCAA tournament because they were an automatic berth because they won the conference championship. Consensus, and I forget what the other school was. But you want to be part of a conference. So Arizona State, Greg Powers, their head coach, hockey coach, said something to the effect of things are looking good in that regard, but we do not have steam on where Arizona State hockey is going to join. Our Arizona State Money Perch, the person who gave us great information for years on Arizona State hockey, he is diving into it. So hopefully we'll have some information real soon. Arizona to NCHC, not the Big Ten, in my opinion. That very well could be. I'm guessing the NCHC is the chalk. Most people would say that's where they're going, but we shall see. Again, the phone line, 763-260-1333. The lines are wide open. David Sebasta says the NCHC is better for Arizona State travel. You got Colorado College, you have Denver University. Yeah, absolutely correct. And who wouldn't want to be in the NCHC? I mean, of course you'd want to be in the Big Ten because, the money, playing against major universities, and maybe that's a wedge that you can use years down the line to be a full member of the Big Ten. But besides all that, the place to be is the NCHC. David is absolutely correct. I see that Mankato State, Minnesota State, lost their hockey coach. Big time hockey coach, has been there forever. Or I shouldn't say forever, but I don't know. It's interesting that your date for Big Ten hire as a new commissioner is the same date as the Arizona State Money Perch sticking together date. Again, I just find it interesting that the Arizona State Money Perch guy, instead of saying the Pac-12 has such and such a date to get a deal done or the Pac-12 schools leave, he kind of flipped it around and said, if the Pac-12 stays together and they stay together all the way until the middle of May, they're probably not breaking up. And if you think about it in those terms, it makes a lot of sense. Because at some point, it's not going to get any better, right? It's not going to get any better for the Pac-12 schools in regards to getting an immediate deal done. So if they're okay with what's happening right now, if they're not breaking up right now, if there's no school that's going to take a leap into the Big 12 by the middle of May, Arizona State Money Perch says, well, that school is not going to be jumping in the middle of June, the middle of July, the middle of August, the middle of September. And as I reflect on that, it makes a lot of sense. So if you're a fan of one of those four corner schools, if you're a Colorado Buffalo, if you're an Arizona State Sun Devil, if you're an Arizona Wildcat, if you're a Utah Ute, if you want your school to go to the Big 12, if you're one of those fans that want to have their universities get poached by the Big 12, move to the Big 12, then you, according to Arizona State Money Perch, you better have middle of May circled, because you have to leave before then. Because if you don't leave before then your university has definitely made a decision. We're not leaving. We're going to give this another 3 or 4 or 5 years until Oregon and Washington leaves.
Call from
Moen, Mr. Buckeyes in the house. The floor is yours, good sir.
Well, Greg, I just wanted to give my thoughts and prayers to Golden Blue Dude's family.
Yes, sir.
Wasn't a huge fan of his content, but God, I appreciate the hustle.
Yeah.
He was in my feed 2 or 3 times a day with content.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make a point about Oregon and Washington and Fox Sports and wooing Gene Smith and his block of votes. It's not. It just can't be a deal to cover the freight. It has to be a deal that's going to add some money to some of the smaller schools' pockets. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know. I'm still leaning towards the Big Ten sticking at 16 at least until Notre Dame is secured. I mean, if Notre Dame joined tomorrow, Oregon, Washington would be in, but
yeah,
I just don't see the schools like Indiana, Northwestern, or Purdue going along with a deal that's going to relegate them more towards streaming and not put anything else in their pocket.
Yeah. You make a good point. You make a good point from that perspective. No question about it.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at, and we're still waiting on Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I think that's one of Gene Smith's holdups too, that he wants to secure Notre Dame before anybody else. So
yeah.
That's just what I hear in the Ohio State circles.
Yeah.
Take it for what it's worth, Greg.
Got it.
All right. Well,
thank you, sir.
I just also want to make one more point, Greg. Can I make one more point?
Yeah.
I think with the passing of Golden Blue Dude, it really kind of sheds a light on the creators of YouTube, and maybe we don't thank them enough for their content, or don't thank them often enough, I should say. So I just wanted to thank you, Greg. You've always been a fantastic content creator. You're always first out there to interact with the fans on Twitter or via your show. And I just want to say thank you and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Monovision. I do appreciate it. Thank you, good sir.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Thanks for those kind words, Monovision. Monovision brings up a great, that's the thing. You got a big conference, right? All these schools have different interests. Purdue's interests may not align with someone else's interests in the Big Ten. What is in it for me? That's what those Big Ten schools are asking if they expand. First of all, a couple arguments. You know what? In fact, I'm going to take the phone just off the hook for a sec, guys. I apologize. I want to get into this just a little bit here. Monovision brought up a good point. I apologize. Just give me a chance to say something here. Then we'll get back to your phone calls. A couple selling points that could be made to Purdue and Indiana, Minnesota, Northwestern, whatever, about adding Oregon and Washington before a Notre Dame comes aboard. Just give me a second here. Hang with me. Two selling points. One is, if you add an Oregon and Washington before the 2024 season, we would get more regionalized scheduling throughout all the sports. There's no question about that. If you bring in an Oregon and Washington now, UCLA and USC is playing Oregon and Washington as their primary rivals. Those are 3 games right off the slate. Right now, each of those schools have 6 games left. That's an average of 12 home games. Now you have 12 of the 14 schools making 14 other Big Ten schools making one trip to the West Coast. Regionality in basketball, you got 20 conference games. Now Oregon will have a home and away with 3 of those schools in the Pacific Coast. Of course, so will Washington, USC, UCLA. Now you're down to 14 games. Now you got 7 home games, 7 away games. If you regionalize the scheduling, you have Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska. Those 4 teams are a part of scheduling. You have those 4 schools of Indiana, Purdue, Northwestern, Illinois. That scheduling, you double up those games in non-revenue Olympic sports. And then the 6 other Eastern schools, you make a pod scheduling with those schools. If you write it all down, if you put the pen to paper, if you put the pen down to your napkin, you see you do cut down on traveling. You do cut down on less travel, time zone travel. Less changing your time zone. Over a year, over years. So that's the instant. That argument can be made to a Purdue where you're going to get instant gratification if you expand to Oregon and Washington. And here's a long-term argument for bringing in an Oregon, Washington in right now. The long-term argument is balance, composition of the entire conference. Because there's no question. From a PAT perspective, there's no question at all, that the Big Ten is not going to expand out east, southeast. They're going to be successful. At some point, the SEC, if the ACC implodes, the SEC is not going to take all the top targets. If they do, there's still some valuable assets there that the Big Ten will grab. Big Ten wants to get in the Southeast, they will get into the Southeast. Because you're doing that in the future, at some point you want to balance out the total composition of your conference. Therefore, you're going to have to take at least a couple more in the Pacific Coast. So you have long-term incentive, short-term incentive for an expansion of Oregon and Washington. Those are arguments you can make to a Purdue. You can make to a Minnesota. You can make to an Indiana. You can make to a Northwestern. By the way, Northwestern's in Oregon, the president of Oregon went to Northwestern. Those are arguments you can make to those schools. However, as Monovision says, though, all those arguments are going to fall flat if you do expand and you're not putting more money into the pockets of these schools on day one that this expansion happens. So that's a huge hurdle to overcome. Okay, I just want to get into that. I'll get you back to your comments. Phone lines are back open. 763-260-1333. Jared Jones, Oregon, Washington puts the Indianas, Purdue's, Northwestern, Rutgers on BTN and FS1 even more often. Those schools need compensation. Again, Jared Jones, Buckeyes, backing up Monovision's Buckeye statements. T. Duck says SC UCLA going to regret being home on an island. Charles M., Big 12 needs to go ahead and add San Diego State, add UConn, add Fresno State. Wow. Big 12. That UConn situation, huh? They win another men's basketball championship. They are a blue blood of basketball. You cannot deny them that anymore. How does the Big 12 now look at UConn, the University of Connecticut? What is Brett Yormark thinking about UConn now? We know that Brett Yormark in the past has said out in the open in public that he wants to be able to tell the Big 12 story in New York all the way to Los Angeles. Those were Brett Yormark words. Well, who can tell the story better in New York than UConn? Possibly Syracuse, but Syracuse is not available. UConn is. Women's basketball, men's basketball, Yormark wants to keep his conference as the most dominating basketball conference in the country. He wants to be national. He wants to be able to tell the Big 12 story from New York to Los Angeles. He wants that New York media, powerful media market to talk about Big 12 sports. So is UConn ready to come through the back window? Come into the Big 12? UConn finally getting into a Power 5 conference? Or would it just be basketball? Again, give me your comments. We haven't talked much about UConn at all on this channel. I think we should begin to do that here. UConn does it again. Does it again. Roman Maroney, for the life of me, I don't get the obsession with Notre Dame. Their TV numbers are good, but not that good. Roman laying it down. Notre Dame. Notre Dame's TV numbers would be sensational if they were in the Big Ten. I mean, the reason why Notre Dame's TV numbers aren't that great is because the schedule, 7 home games, they have some games that are just not watchable because some of those teams they play. And they're playing some ACC opponents that are very small markets. Look, the reason why the SEC has the highest ratings in football is because people outside the SEC watch the games and SEC country watches SEC football. The reason why the Big Ten is close behind in number 2 in football ratings is because Big Ten country watches Big Ten football. When the Buckeyes get done blasting somebody on a Saturday afternoon, some of those Buckeye fans turn on to watch a Purdue-Minnesota game on a Saturday night. They just do. Columbus, look at Columbus TV ratings. They watch Big Ten football. So Notre Dame, if they were in the Big Ten, even more Big Ten fans would watch Notre Dame football because they're in the Big Ten. So Notre Dame does quite well with their TV ratings as an independent program. We've talked about this over and over and over again at Peek Around the Corner. As a standalone product, it is tough out there. It is tough to get a media deal. It's tough to get sponsorship deals. When you're part of a big conference, it's easier. It's easier to rake in the money. And now it's getting more and more so that way. It's all trending towards super conferences. Super conferences possibly paying the student athletes. Super conferences bundling their data to sell to sports books consortiums. Over and over again, issue after issue after issue. It's all trending now. It may change 20 years from now, but it's all trending towards super conferences. That's why we believe at Peek Around the Corner, The walls are slowly closing in on Notre Dame. TV ratings, that's just a symptom of their issues. Stephen Lane, Notre Dame would be in the second echelon at best in a few years of joining the Big Ten. I don't think they'd fall as far as Nebraska did, but they wouldn't be one of the top teams. People outside the Big Ten have a hard time understanding this because they think there's like 5 or 6 great teams in the Big Ten and the rest of them are bad. That's just not the case. It's hard to get through a Big Ten schedule. Everyone is big, especially those big, slow teams out in the Big Ten West. It's just a different brand of football. So you're going to have to beef up. Nebraska has been saying this for years. We need to get bigger. We need to get bigger. We need to get bigger. As every single year they get pushed around by Iowa. They get pushed around by lowly Minnesota. They get pushed around by Wisconsin. They need to get bigger. USC is going to need to get bigger. That second string defensive tackle is going to have to be 310 pounds. It's just the way it is because you play a Big Ten opponent week in, week out on these fields that are slowed down, that a lot of water is sprayed, where the grass is long. You got to get big. You got to get big. So yeah, Notre Dame, they would have to change it up a bit. Although Notre Dame's offensive line has been fantastic pretty much over the last 10 years. But yeah, any team coming, pretty much any university coming in the Big Ten is going to struggle, at least at the beginning. That's part of it. Nebraska pushed around because they don't get Texas athletes anymore. Well, they're going to have to find a solution. They can go out west. They can go to California. Probably won't work.
Call from
Lance.
Lance, thanks for calling, sir. The floor is yours.
Hey, sir. I'm just calling because I know UConn was just brought up, but when I look around, I think like the Big 12, there's probably about 6 teams. NC State, Pitt, Virginia Tech, Louisville, maybe even Georgia Tech, where all it would take would be the Big 12 and say the Big 10 to come in and take 8 teams. Now, I know there's the big worry about the grant of rights, but from what I've read, if 8 teams decided to want to leave the ACC, that would be a majority of the teams and would then disband the conference. I mean, wouldn't it make more sense for the Big 12 to, talk to the Big 10 or maybe even the SEC and say, well, let's go after 8 of these guys, and then it's just over. There isn't a lot that can be done once a majority of the teams want to leave. That would make more sense in my eyes than saying, we're going to go grab UConn, because that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
No, I understand what you're saying. You're saying that these schools could get together. Are you still there? I think I lost them. Okay. Okay, let me answer this comment. I'm going to take the phone lines off for a second because I lost Lance. Maybe Lance hung up. But the dissolution question, where 8 ACC schools would vote to dissolve the conference, thus dissolving the grant of rights because the ACC no longer exists. We've been told that won't work. We've been told that Florida State Money Perch says it won't work. That's not the avenue that Florida State is going. They're actually looking at options. We talked about it. I think it was our last live show. Options to challenge the grant of rights. Go back to a live show and talk about that. But But they don't believe that works. We can't have collusion involved in this. Even with Florida State possibly pulling the trigger and challenging the grant of rights, they're doing it separately. They're not doing it with any schools. These schools coming together behind the scenes and saying, let's vote to dissolve the conference. Supposedly, that would violate some sort of state law, something going on in North Carolina. Collusion is cannot be part of this. And also you have the aspect of ESPN doesn't want the ACC to blow up. ESPN is not a party to any sort of conspiracy that would break up the ACC. They love that contract. They love that it goes out to 2036. So I can only tell you what we've been told, Lance, and that the dissolution theory is not really something that anyone's truly looking at. We talked about it months and months ago at Peek Around the Corner. We thought it was an interesting idea. We talked to people and they said, nope, it's not going to work. It wouldn't work. Someone actually has to go and say, challenge the grant of rights, and at some point say, we did not get enough consideration for what we gave up in that deal. Something to that effect. Okay, I'm going to put the phone lines back on. Thanks for the phone call, Lance. I do apologize if for whatever reason this system hung up on you. But I think Matt, you might have hung up, and that's fine. Thanks for the phone call. Great question. Killini, if we're worried about how USC and UCLA's island is a problem, why add yet another island with Florida State? Well, you wouldn't just add Florida State. You would add a Florida State Miami, a Florida State North Carolina, Florida State Virginia, a Florida State Georgia Tech. And it's not just about the miles, it's about what time zone you're in. Penn State, and look at all the teams that share the same time zone with Florida State and a Georgia Tech or Florida State in North Carolina. Well, you got Penn State, you got Maryland, you got Rutgers, you got Ohio State, Michigan, a whole bunch of them. The problem with USC and UCLA and USC is they're in a completely different time zone, 2 time zones away. So you can cut down on the time zone travel if you get 2 other schools. And I got to tell you, we've been saying this since June 30th, but that's always was the plan. Never to have them home on an island. And I can't, whenever this happens, whenever Big Ten expansion happens again out in the Pacific Coast, whenever it happens, 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, 2 years from now, I can't wait till the story breaks and people talk about the original plans of the Big Ten. It was USC, UCLA, get them on board. Fox Sports wanted the whole Los Angeles market to themselves. They didn't want ESPN coming on in. Everybody was on board, all the boosters. And then look at other targets to see if you shook the tree hard enough, if Notre Dame would fall. They did not. Then you see if another media company comes in and overpowers you with an incredible deal, then you bring on a couple more Pacific Coast schools. Neither of those happened at this time. But now, the math kind of changes. Pac-12 is really struggling to get a deal. Washington and Oregon coming in at even a more of a discount rate is probably viable. Does that change it up with the Big Ten and with a potential new media partner of the Big Ten? Maybe. Fox Sports is not going to pay for it, but they're also not going to stop it. That's what we hear at Peek Around the Corner. Phone lines are back on 763-260-1333. Now, everyone's saying, Nebraska lost the recruiting, going north. Well, let me say something here. Nebraska, they've been losing. They've lost to Minnesota 4 years in a row. They lost to Iowa 7 years in a row before they beat Iowa last year. They've been getting beat by Wisconsin like a rented mule every year. They've been losing to Illinois now. In Minnesota, who are we recruiting? We get some Texas guys, but it's not like we're out recruiting Nebraska. Ladies and gentlemen, according to all those recruiting ratings, we're not even close. So Nebraska's had an issue with their coaches. Terrible developmental program. They used to be the best, now they're the worst. So it's not just about recruiting. Look at Frost recruiting rankings. They were always better than most of the Big Ten West schools. But they got pushed around. That Scott Frost offense was never going to work in the Big Ten. Never going to work in the Big Ten. Where you throw those flat passes out in the sideline to those wide receivers. Have your quarterback run the ball on assigned running plays 10, 12 times a game. Not establishing the running back one on your roster ever during Scott Frost. Not putting the ball downfield to get the linebackers off the line of scrimmage. So basically it was flat pass, flat pass, flat pass. Oh, let my quarterback run. By the middle of the second quarter, quarterback for Nebraska was always banged up, injured, nicked up, because nobody on the opposing defense in the Big Ten, none of those defense ever got off the line of scrimmage. There was no threat. They didn't have to. Nebraska didn't throw slant passes behind the linebackers. They never did a rollout and throw it deep down the sideline. Everything was to the flat, to the flat, to the flat, run the quarterback. That only kills your quarterback in the Big Ten. Did that work with the University of Central Florida in the AAC? Yeah, that worked. Your athletes were better than everybody else in that conference when you were the head coach, Scott Frost. It was never going to work in the Big Ten. And I had for 5 years Cornhusker fans just chewing me out because I said that over and over again on Twitter. And you saw what happened. So Matt Rule, good coach, great coach. I'm a little nervous about the quarterbacks they have this year. So I think they can get to 6-6. But if Matt Rule can get a big-time quarterback, high school, that Riola kid, I think they're going to be heading in the right direction. Because Matt Rule's not going to have that offense that Scott Frost had. No way, no how. And for Nebraska to keep Scott Frost for that long was a horrific decision. Just horrific out there in Lincoln, Nebraska. Can the conference kick out Nebraska? They're not going to kick out Nebraska. Nebraska is a very valuable institution in the Big Ten. Big Ten's not kicking out anybody. Not kicking out anybody. Wet blanket. Nebraska and the triple option both are gone forever. The triple option would have been a better offense in the Big Ten than what Nebraska has been running. That's for sure. But yes, they got to change it up. And they will. Under Matt Rule, they'll change it up. Big 12 sports, Baylor football. Patrick, Matt Rule is a good coach, but he's fishing in a different pond. Don't know what his success will be. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fascinating. Can Matt Rule do for the Nebraska football program like he did at Temple, like he did at Baylor? We shall see. We shall see again. Big Ten West is going away after this year. It's going to be one conference. 16 teams or maybe 18 teams. We shall see. But the road only gets more difficult for Nebraska. And Nebraska has a huge name, image, and likeness program. No doubt about that. So that's also going to help Nebraska football. Rebecca Salisbury, Mrs. Husky's in the house. Rule turned around Temple. He can certainly turn around Nebraska. Again, if you just joined us, we talked about the Dennis Dodd CBS article. We broke it down. Jimmy Williams, the consultant, Pac-12 unlikely to reach a media rights deal with more than 50% game airing on TV. Longtime consultant says, as the Pac-12 continues to search for a new media rights deal, it becomes less viable. The conference will land a partner willing to feature more than half its games on traditional cable or broadcast television, media consultants told CBS Sports. We provided a link in the description box of the whole article. Go read it. We also talked about our friend Chris Petrie, Golden Blue dude who passed away. We did an episode early this morning in a tribute to him. We went and sang Country Roads. Chris and I had been talking lately behind the scenes. He'd show up here on our chat room. Put almost every live show, giving us encouragement here at Peek Around the Corner. So we always will appreciate him. So go ahead, put comments down. Your favorite memories of Chris Petrie doing his show. Give us a call. I've said this before. I'll say it again. My favorite moment of this whole channel is when the West Virginia Mountaineers lost to Pittsburgh last year in the backyard brawl game. The game was played at Pittsburgh. He was driving to his hotel. He was at the game. He's driving to the hotel, and he talked about the loss and how discouraging the game was. And West Virginia was right there, but they had a couple of drop passes. And that last throw that went through the receiver's hands went into the Pittsburgh secondary, and it was a pick six, and that won the game for Pittsburgh. But Chris talked like a true, passionate college football fan. He said everything in that moment that we have all said in private after a tough loss. And he shared that with everybody. The angst, just the sheer pain of losing against your rival. And he shared that with us all in a very entertaining way, like always. I think it was fantastic because it showed what we all go through. We all lose, right? We talked about that in a couple live shows ago, where it's important. This society, we need to learn to take the L. We need to learn to take the W. We need to go learn how to lose. We need to learn how to win, not to become bullies in life. We need to learn how to lose. We need to learn how to lose. And Chris Petrie, man, he was so entertaining. The hardest worker out there in college football YouTube, put episode after episode after episode. And was he for everybody? No. Am I for everybody? Absolutely not. That's what's so great about college football YouTube, because there's such a diversity of content and how it gets delivered. So we talked about Chris Petrie at the beginning of this live show. I was thinking about not having a live show. I promoted it yesterday, but then, Chris would have done it. Chris would have told me, do it. Chris Petrie would have already had 2 episodes out today, working on a 3rd one by this afternoon. So we decided, let's do it. But I know there's a lot of sadness being shared through Mountaineer country. I know the family has put out that Chris Petrie's funeral will be tomorrow, South Carolina Baptist Church. You go to his YouTube channel, you can find the information there. We have a link in the description box in this live show in our episode of earlier today, episode 182 of the GoFundMe page. So please, if you are moved to go there, hit the link box and please donate to help out Chris's family. Okay.
Call from
Soap.
Yes, sir. What's going on? The floor is yours.
Hey, Greg, it's Soap from Houston. First, I want to applaud you on your outstanding memorandum for Golden Blue. I had never heard you sing before, sir, and it truly moved me, and I want to thank you for that. That was very special. The other day, I called and talked to you about something I'd found on one of your previous episodes where you were talking about some problem. I think it was episode 22. There was a problem with the Big Ten, the Pac-10, Pac-12, preventing schools from moving, and then you had said that you might have made a mistake on that. I don't know if you remember that call or not.
Yeah, I do. Yep.
I went back to that, and you were talking about a previous call I had prior to that when I had talked to you about what my idea was for the change in the structuring of the leagues. And I haven't been able to get in live with you until today. And I watched your conversation on Florida State. And there was something I wanted to ask you about. My thinking with the Florida State situation is the easiest way for them to resolve that with Florida State being able to leave the ACC is to get 8 teams to agree to dissolve the league, because they can communicate between themselves to have a vote to do that. And that's neither corruption or collusion.
Okay.
If they are discussing starting a new league. And let's say they pick 8 teams, and we could decide what 8 teams they were, but they started the Big Southeast Atlantic Coast Conference. They took then those 8 teams and they made an arrangement where up until 2030, all funds that they get from either the SEC or the Big 12, those funds would go into a co-op and be divided evenly among all 8 of those schools. You're looking at, I think, $70 million from the SEC and $30 million from the Big 12. You're not including it as the money that the schools would earn from making the playoffs or going to the big dance or anything like that, but just the revenue from the broadcast agreements. And so that's $100 million divided by, $100 million. That's $800 million divided by 8 schools. It comes out to $50 million a year per school for that period of time. And they could dissolve the entire ACC. My idea is that obviously Florida State and Clemson would go to the SEC. And you have a question about whether Duke and North Carolina are willing to be separated. If they are willing to be separated, then North Carolina and Miami would go to the SEC, and Duke, Virginia Tech, and Louisville would be my choice for the schools to be part of the PAC or the Big 12. But I think I didn't hear you address it. If you did, I'm terribly sorry. But I really think that's the quickest way that could happen. And if they had a vote, then all the dominoes start falling, because that's when the people in the Pac-10 start jumping on board. And Notre Dame's going to go to the Big Ten because they don't have a relationship with the AC and ACC. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, and I'll hang up and listen.
Okay.
And thanks again for the really stirring moment we had this morning. Thanks.
You got
Talk
it.
to you later, Rick.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to answer that call. I just took the phone out the hook, so give me a moment. Let me answer that call, and then the phone lines will be back open. I appreciate those kind words. Again, we have Peek Around the Corner. We do not believe that dissolution can work. We've been told it cannot work. Because of collusion, in other words, and let's just say, but let's just say it can work. Let's just say the information, that's why we don't talk about it much, that theory. But let's just say we were wrong. Let's just say I've been wrong all this time. The information we got was wrong. And let's say tomorrow we wake up and 8 schools have gotten together to dissolve the conference. Therefore, in the state of North Carolina, it will hold, and the ACC dissolves. Therefore, the ACC doesn't hold the grant of rights. Therefore, those schools do not have back their own individual media rights to go and join the SEC, join the Big Ten, join the Big 12. So let's just say all of our information is incorrect, which it could be. What 8 schools would be involved in voting to dissolve the conference? Let's start there. Well, if you're going to dissolve the conference that way, I would have to say, in the state of North Carolina, can North Carolina really leave out North Carolina State? How many issues would they have if they left out North Carolina State? If North Carolina was now going to go to the SEC and the Big Ten, and North Carolina State was going to be left to a dwindling ACC, or, right? I mean, it almost would seem that the 4 Carolina schools would have to be involved in this vote. North Carolina State, Wake Forest, North Carolina Duke, and then Virginia, Virginia Tech, they would have to be in this together, right? I mean, you couldn't have Virginia vote on it, be part of these 8 schools, let's say 4 going to the SEC, 4 going to the Big Ten, and leave Virginia Tech out. I think that would cause a lot of problems inside the state of Virginia. So let's say you bring in Virginia, Virginia Tech, that's already 6 schools. And then Miami and Florida State. You need to have both those schools involved. Okay, now what do you do with Clemson? I don't know. We have been told this won't work. It's not going to work. It wouldn't break the gore. ESPN, I would say this. It won't alleviate the contractual obligations that the ACC and those schools have with the ESPN. But a whole lot of smart people disagree with our take. A whole lot of smart people agree with our take. But we have sources that we trust that have told us dissolution is not a pathway to dissolve the ACC. And I think there's a reason why most of these national college football reporters don't even comment about it. Basically, they don't talk about it at all. It comes down to, can someone go to court and break the grant of rights, break them away from the conference entirely because something in that grant of rights is not worked. Something has changed, or there wasn't enough consideration given to the school when their president signed on the dotted line to extend it from 2027 2036. So it sounds, it sounds like it would work. I'm not a lawyer. I don't even play one on our channel. But I've been told that is not how Florida State, if they pull the trigger, it's not how it's going to happen. That's not how things will go down. And I'm not smart enough to say it any better than that, unfortunately. So hopefully I answered your question. I'm sure I didn't, and I apologize for that, but that's what we've been told. So we don't really spend a whole lot of time on that. But again, if it pops up again, we'll talk about it. Thanks for the great phone call. Back to the chat. Again, the phone lines are now open again. 763-260-1333. Ask for the kind words about what we did early this morning. I thank you so much. Actually, when we released that video, we got a copy strike against us. So I must have hit enough notes correctly for the first time. Somehow we got a copy strike, but that's the way it goes.
Ryan Thomas.
Ryan Thomas is in the house. The floor is yours. What do you got to say, good sir?
Well, first of all, Greg, I want to give my condolences to Golden Blues family. It's heartbreaking, and it's really a reminder of how fragile life is for all of us, and sort of puts all this into context. You know, he was a good guy. He worked hard on his channel. You know, he's entertaining, and unfortunately, you know, when you have those chronic health issues, they can just create other problems. And unfortunately for Chris, you know, that caught up with him, and my heart goes out to his fiance and his children and his family. And that was a nice, sweet tribute that you gave to him earlier today. So I want to, you know, first say that. I wanted to address the last caller's point on ACC dissolution. I think on paper, the idea sounds, you know, it sounds like it could work, but in reality it won't, because the biggest issue is that's content that ESPN would lose value on. And the ESPN has to be made whole. I mean, it can't be using FSU or UNC content to NBC, Fox, and CBS on the Big Ten. You got to, I mean, because ESPN would have a right to sue the ACC for breach of contract. They would incur damages. And the other problem with the dissolution route as well is, regardless of, I've counted probably 12 of those 15 schools could find homes in either the Big 12, the SEC or Big Ten. But it comes back to the issues. Wake Forest, Syracuse, and Boston College would suffer a financial, economic, devastating loss, and there would be lawsuits from that direction as well. So, I mean, I really think the dissolution path, you know, it sounds easy, but in reality, there's a whole bunch of parties you have to make whole. And I don't think ESPN, you know, even, and like I DM'd you before, even if FSU was able to get out of this with Clemson and others, I really think the only choice they have is to go to the SEC, because that's the only way that ESPN is going to be okay with it. They're not going to be okay with losing that value and that content to a league where they're not a broadcast partner. And I think that that's going to be an interesting thing. I think the only linchpin that really makes this happen, you know, the world revolves around them. I don't know if it's a narcissistic trait of the university or not, but really the world revolves around Notre Dame. And, you know, I don't know what it takes for Notre Dame to get out of the ACC. I don't know if there's any financial penalties for them. I don't know if you've heard anything. I don't know the extent of how it is or what agreements they have. I've heard various conflicting things of whether or not, you know, they have, if they join a conference, it has to be the ACC, or I don't know what I've heard there. I'd love to have a show later on where we go into more details as far as how the ACC gets out of how Notre Dame gets out of the ACC. I don't know what happens, but really that's the trigger, because at that point, then that can cause the whole issue with, the grant of rights being, you know, set back to 2027. But even with that, you know, I think that somehow, some way, you know, the mouse or Disney or ESPN has to be made whole. And I think that's the part that people forget, you know, on top of all of this is, that's a key component that can't be ignored. My last take on the Pac-12, I've actually messaged a lot with Jim Williams, talked with him, a really great guy. He actually lives here in D.C. He actually doesn't live too far from me. He actually lives near where my office is. But anyway, Jim's a good guy. That was a great call that was a great interview he did. I think that I have a hard time seeing how they get to 70% or more being linear without involving CW or ION. And people can laugh at Brett McMurphy, but I probably was onto something.
Yeah, he always is.
Yeah, and I think that's something that he's raised. I don't know with President Robbins, Arizona. I don't know if he's just being super coy or super dumb. My guess is I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's being super coy about everything. And that his comments are kind of more or less a public ultimatum of, what Arizona needs to stay. But like I said, and I've mentioned many times, I think the likely outcome is I think Arizona and Arizona State do bail, but SMU and San Diego State backfill into the PAC, because until the Big Ten signals that it's going to add Oregon and Washington, those two have no incentive to go in. They don't have an incentive to go to the Big. I mean, they have no choice but to stay in the PAC until the opportunity comes. So I could see Washington, Oregon, and perhaps Stanford biding their time in the Pac-12 until the next Big Ten deal. However, I think some schools like Arizona or ASU may not want to stick around for that and may leave early. I mean, who knows how this goes, but it'll be interesting to see. I think at the end of the day, I think they'll still stay at 10 teams, but I think Arizona and Arizona State are gone. I think Washington and Oregon have every incentive to stay. Utah and Colorado, I don't really know what their thoughts are. Cal and Stanford probably have the same desires as Washington and Oregon, but whether or not they have the same opportunities is another question. But anyway, that's my take, Greg. Thanks for the show, and everybody have a great and wonderful afternoon. Just remember to be grateful for the blessings you have in life, people, and just be thankful. And as Greg pointed out too, we can all disagree without being disagreeable, and we can be all civil to each other. So if if you guys want to say I'm an idiot, then I'm an idiot. But, I think everybody's, take is valid, and it's always interesting to have this discussion. And thank you for providing that for me. Have a great day, Greg.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Wonderful call. Thank you so much, Ryan. Opie, thank you so much for your continuous, incredible generosity to the show, helping us keep the lights on here. Thank you so much, Opie. ACC is like a bad marriage now. Some school just needs to file the court papers so we can see what the actual grant of rights is. If ESPN sees that someone will be successful, you think they guide the schools where they want to the SEC. That was the end of Opie's statement. I don't know. The problem is ESPN loves that contract they have with the ACC. Now, I'm assuming that if the Big Ten somehow, some way expands here in the next couple months with Washington and Oregon, does that put some pressure on the SEC to expand, to keep up with the Big Ten when it comes to media markets and whatever power inside the college landscape? Yada, 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 yada. Probably not. But is that something that ESPN would look at and say, well, maybe we need to be the invisible hand that moves a couple schools in the SEC? Probably not. Probably not. If I'm just throwing that out there. One other thing I want to say about Robbins. There's two ways. Okay, how do I say this? Anytime a school leaves a conference to another conference, right? I shouldn't say not. Most of the time, when a school leaves from one conference to another, realignment, there is some consternation behind the scenes, some political maneuvers that have to be done, right? Not everyone's going to agree with it. There's going to be some pounding of the table. It happened when Maryland went to the Big Ten. Not everybody, USC and UCLA, wanted them to go to the Big Ten. Okay, so how do you do it then? What's the best way to do it without getting hit by the slings and arrows of some boosters, with some faculty members, with some legislatures in your county, in the state that your university presides in? What's the best way for a university to jump from Conference A to Conference B? Well, I can think of two ways. One, you do it in the middle of the night. Nobody knows. Bam, the announcement. Boom, 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 boom. You move as fast as you can. That's what happened in Texas, Oklahoma. Remember, we heard this announcement that they were in the works. They had all this time back and forth talking. They were ready. Once the Houston Chronicle broke the news, announcement from the conference, announces that invitations will be passed out, the announcement from the schools, they consummated, they signed the deal. Now they're not leaving for a few. When that deal was announced in 2019, it took a few years, right? Obviously. But what I'm saying is that they did it in the middle of the night. No one was watching. USC, UCLA, nobody knew it except for this fat guy from Minnesota with all the purchase, and we put that news out there. But not many of the major media companies were in on it. They didn't know it. They weren't paying attention. And they did it, UCLA, USC, June 30th. Remember when it was announced that all these writers, all these people were saying, I'm shocked, I'm shocked, I'm shocked, I'm shocked. And I'm sitting there with my head in my hands. I'm shocked. This is happening. They did it without too much fanfare. People didn't know. People couldn't get ready to block the move. Okay, that is something that a four-corner school can't do because all eyes are on this process. They can't just... So Robbins, I think, is doing the other option. Option B. He's putting a big target on his head. So big that if he does decide University of Arizona moves to the Big 12, that he's not going to get much flack for it either, because he's putting such a big target. He's saying, look, I don't want to go. We're committed. But, of course, we need 50% of this deal to be linear. This is a business decision. But I don't want to go. I'm willing to wait on this. All the other Pac-12 schools, they want to see a deal now. I'm willing to wait. But this is a business decision. Right? So he wants attention. He's had a couple interviews with just CBS Sports alone. He's doubled down on what he says, what they need from the Pac-12 media contract. This is also another way that you can go from Conference A to Conference B with as little as flack with incoming fire as possible. Because you made everybody know, I don't want to go, but we need this. But I don't want to go, but we need this. I don't want to go. I know what the Big 12 numbers are. I just need to see our numbers. That's it. That's all. Now, if they decide to leave, he's covered his bases. It's where you go in between that where you're going to catch a lot of incoming fire from your faculty, boosters, what have you. Okay, I just wanted to put that out there. Again, the phone lines are back open. 763-260-1333. Opie, again, thank you so much for your very generous donation. Thank you, kind sir. Douglas Hall, Minnesota loses another one to the transfer portal. President Gable is transferring to Pittsburgh. Yeah. Yeah, we lost another one. Okay, so Lewis Papp, thanks for coming into the chat room. Appreciate it. According to Lockdown Pac-12 podcast, Warren wanted to add Oregon and Washington, but the Big Ten president said no. So he told them he's taking the Chicago job. It's more nuanced than that. Warren wanted to bring in an Oregon and Washington, even possibly a Stanford, possibly a California. But Oregon and Washington were his next available targets. Some Big Ten presidents were fine with that happening. Some were not. Nowhere close to what Warren needed. But I'm going to tell you something. There were some people that they wanted Washington and Oregon to be part of the Big Ten. Everything we discussed about UCLA, they don't want them home on an island. They don't want just two Pacific Coast schools. But none of the Big Ten presidents wanted further expansion to happen under Kevin Warren's watch. So when Kevin Warren leaves, that door is cracked open. That door is cracked open. It is cracked open. But it gets pushed even a little bit further open. Nobody wants Kevin Warren to consummate any more expansion deals. Kevin Warren is that unpopular among the Big Ten presidents. So, we shall see. We'll see what happens. Greg knows something you can see by the look on his face. Well, I have a dumb-looking face regardless what I'm talking about. Just ask the little general. However, all I'm saying is people perceive Big Ten not expanding at this time. Oh, how do I say this? The door's cracked open. It is. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's cracked open. There is interest. There is motivation to get it done. There is. The timing might not be right. May not be able to get all the votes. May not be able to get Gene Smith. May not be able to get enough compensation for the current Big Ten schools to make this deal happen. But there is interest. There is interest. There is interest inside the Big Ten. There is a motivation. It isn't, the Big Ten is fractured on this situation. And the math has changed a little bit. Has it changed enough? Is there a media partner talking to the Big Ten saying, you know what? We'll write the check to get this done if we get some streaming games. But by the way, we need a one Michigan on our streaming platform. We need one Ohio State game on our platform. Can you get that done? And probably at that time, Kevin Warren or Gene Smith probably says no. There's a lot of give and take to all this stuff. But the door is cracked open. That's all I can say on it. Tough Tony. Go for Tony. The ACC media deal is bad for Florida State and Miami. By extension, it's bad for the state of Florida. It does Ron DeSantis and the state step in. DeSantis versus Disney. Thank you so much for the super chat. In our live show, in our last live show, we talked about the options that Florida State has. We revealed it. It was on March 31st. Go back to our March 31st live show. One of the options, the third option, the option that was has the least amount of chance of happening is DeSantis. Is the state government a sovereignty issue when it comes to Florida State? When it comes to the state of Florida saying, look, our public school cannot get into it's not legal for our public school to get into this type of deal with a conference that is beholden, that is in the state of North Carolina. South Carolina has the same exact issue with this in regards to Clemson. The sovereignty issue. It is the least possible option on the board. The number one option we talked about on March 31st in our special live show was the option of Notre Dame bolting. That would pretty much, in Florida State's estimation, pretty much blow up the extended core from 2027 to 2036 because Florida State signed on the dotted line, knowing that in their consideration, what they were getting back was an ACC network with Notre Dame in the ACC network. They make it profitable enough for them to sign it. If Notre Dame leaves, they take all their schools out, all their sport teams out of the ACC network. That blows up the gore, and the gore at least comes back to 2027, which means Florida State could probably leave in 2026. That's the number one option for Florida State. The other option for Florida State is pulling the trigger on challenging the ACC's grant of rights. Has to do with the fact of Johnson versus the NCAA on other court issues going on right now, and sounds like there's going to be more and more and more coming down, changing the landscape of college sports entirely, which changes media deals entirely. That's what Florida State is also looking at as a possible option in pulling the trigger to actually go to court and challenge the ACC's grant of rights. But thank you, Tony, so much for the super chat. Thank you for all you coming in today. All of you. I appreciate it so very much. Again, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We could be coming on anytime. We could be coming on tonight. If there's breaking news, we'll be on tonight. So you got to be subscribed to our channel. Also, follow us at Flug Empire. You see the ticker on the bottom of the screen, Flug Empire. Follow us on that Twitter account because we usually will put up a tweet saying we're going live here in another hour, another 15 minutes, because peek around the corner, PATC community, you have to keep your head on a swivel at all times. You don't know what's going to happen next. John Famlor, isn't Notre Dame restricted to only joining the ACC as a conference until 2036? We do not believe so. Neither does Heather Dinich of ESPN. A couple years ago, she had a big column out there. Hold on one second. I apologize for that. What was I saying? Heather Dinich, she described, if Notre Dame actually pulls out of the ACC, if they take all their teams out, now they have their men's hockey in the Big Ten, but everything else is in the ACC, except for the football program, which is independent. If they leave the ACC, if they take it all out, they'll probably have to spend over $100 million to get out of the grant of rights. That's how much they would owe in, because they only have the grant of rights between them and the ACC network. Not Tier 1, not Tier 2 content, only the ACC network. So you add up how much money Notre Dame gets per year in the ACC network with how many years remaining on the Gore, 120, 140 million, plus some possible 2-year exit fee if they're part of the bylaws. We don't really know because none of us have seen the extended ACC Gore. But some people, some major college reporters out there have said 120 to 140 million dollars. If Notre Dame takes them all the way out, then they can join another conference. It doesn't have to be the ACC. And at this point in time, Florida State's, North Carolina's, Clemson, Miami, Florida, their athletic directors are praying, their presidents are praying that Notre Dame leaves the ACC. Because they know they know that Notre Dame is not going to join the ACC. So it's better for them to get out entirely. No more of this 5-game deal. No more. Let's break this thing up. Florida State, they believe that if Notre Dame leaves, this gives them a shoo-in to be able to blow up the extended Gore from 2036, bring it back to 2027. And then we're already in 2023. So that is the trigger point. That is when Florida State will pull the trigger if Notre Dame says, we're gone, we have to join the conference, change the landscape. Swarbrick, in his big article a couple weeks ago, saying how all these changes are happening, we don't like it at Notre Dame. If he finally gives up, if he finally waves the white flag and says, we cannot operate anymore as a college, as an independent football program, and we need to join one of these great solar systems, as he talked about months ago. We need to join the SEC of the Big Ten. If he waves the white flag and says yes, Florida State follows and challenges the ACC grant of rights, the extended portion of it. We're going to close it down here today. I thank you so very much. We've been on the air for 2 hours. Again, our heartfelt condolences to Chris Petrie's family, his loved ones. Go to his channel. Watch his brother's statement last night. It was so beautiful. Go to the GoFundMe page. It's on the link in the description box below this video in our episode earlier today. We thank Chris so very much for everything he did in college football YouTube channels. Personally, how he encouraged me to continue on with this endeavor that we both share the love of, YouTube channel and college football, just to have a place for people in a common community to come in, feel safe, and to express themselves, agree, disagree with each other. It doesn't even matter. Just to have fun, talking about the game we love, talking inside a community that feels safe, warmed, and loved. That's what Chris Petrie was all about. The love of the Mountaineers football, Mountaineers sports, and the love of his family attracted all to him and to his YouTube channel. Until next time, from all of us at Peek Around the Corner to all of you, more than ever, please, you all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.